And we're back to FreeCodeCamp. Let us tackle the Markdown Previewer right here. As always, read through the user story yourself. I think that I've covered it all and I found a simple solution for it. I'm going to use CodePen. I can share the code with you here. Let us simply start with the HTML part. I'm going to create a bigger div for the entire app. I'm going to create a div container for the editor, which is a text area. And I need to give it specific IDs. So in this case, text area editor ID is necessary to pass on FreeCodeCamp. And then we need a previewer. I'll call this preview container for the div. And then the actual preview ID for the encapsulated div. And this should already be it for the HTML part. Once again, check your spelling and check FreeCodeCamp to have what you need. Let us add stuff to the head. I can do that in CodePen right here. So I'll add my meta char set and the viewport. Let me give it a title. And then I'm going to link to a Markdown. It's an older version, but it runs. So you can copy this directly from CodePen if you go to the link in the video description. And you can use the same then, and you can be sure that it runs right here in CodePen, at least as I'm making this video. So I'm doing this in real time, and you can see in the end it works. Let's take care of the CSS, the entire body. I'll select that first, change the font family, stuff like this. Just some basic editing so that we have our two windows somewhat in center and somewhat aesthetically set up. I'm not going to go wild here. It's up to you to play around with it. But the moment I give the editor and preview a border, you can see that we actually have these two boxes. So on the left, that's the text area, we could see it right away. But on the right, it's an empty div container, therefore we couldn't yet see anything. Alright, let's get to the hard part, which is the JavaScript. I'll keep it simple here. At first, we need an event listener for the documents. It's the basic setup. And inside, I have defined two variables for the editor and the preview. For both, I need getElement by ID. We've used editor and preview for the divs. On the left, it was a text area. The editor and the preview was a div. But we've used these specific IDs. So we use them here to set our editor and preview to it. But let me make this window a bit bigger so that you can see that these belong together. It's a little bit better for overview. So now you can see that. And update preview is going to be our function, which is actually going to make our changes visible. And for that to work, I want to have a markdown text. And this will be the editor.value. And an HTML text. It's going to use the markdown text. Don't worry, I'll go over this once we have set everything up. The overview is going to be better than I believe. And finally, we'll set the preview.innerHTML to our HTML text. For our editor event listener, we'll use our input, and then we use the update preview function that we've created. And now we have a default markdown. I'm not going to write this in real time, I'll just copy paste this. So it's what is shown in the browser when it loads. So by default, let me just paste it right here. And in the end, we'll set the editor value to the default markdown and use our update preview function. But I've made a typo somewhere, let me check. Right here, it's obviously add event listener, not EA, has to be there. And now you can see it runs, so everything works. Let us test it in the window on the right directly. So here's our default markdown. You can see it on the left in our editor. And if I change the heading, it's updated in the preview directly. Let me check heading 2, it works. Here's the link. You can change the URL or the anchor text above. And the inline code, it updates. So the entire markdown seems to work. Code block is changeable. And if we use, for example, minus indicates a list item, so if I add a new minus, we're going to have a new bullet point for a list item 3. That also works. Block quotes work with greater than. And I've added a simple logo from Markdown here. You can paste any logo here. You can see that. Just change the source, the URL, and you're good. Bold text also works. So our editor runs smoothly and everything is fine. Let us check the code again. So we have a general div for the app and 2 containers for editor and preview. Editor was a text area, preview another div container. In our head, we've changed meta for char set a viewpoint, add a title, and this one's important, the script for linking to our marked. As I've said, you can just use this directly from my CodePen link. CSS, we have changed the body, then the app, which was the entire div container, so the big one that had everything in it. Editor container and preview container right here. Let me change something and you can see these were the 2 outer containers for each. Let me make the padding a bit bigger, maybe like 50. And here are the actual boxes, our text area and the div for the preview ID. And maybe I'll make the border a little bit thicker. Let me change that to 5 pixels. You can play around this afterwards. The JavaScript is important. The Markdown text I have just pasted here. This is not the big one, I believe. This one here is editor.value is set to the default Markdown, and we want to update the preview in the end. That's a function that we've created prior. So start reading the code from here. Our editor.value is set to the default Markdown, and then the update preview is run. Here we have the Markdown text, which is set to the editor value, which is now our default Markdown. And this is then used right here for Markdown text. It's set to our HTML text, and the HTML text is then previewed as the inner HTML. So this is why we can see the Markdown text directly, and we've used our 2 containers by ID to set it up. And here we have the input, which is going to update. So we are going to paste something in as an input and it's directly updated in the preview window. So this function is being run automatically when we change the input. And I think that I've covered it all here. This is the easiest solution that I could come up with. Obviously there are many different solutions, but if you want to have my solution, just go to my CodePen. I've named it FreeCodeCamp Markdown Previewer project in my CodePen. It should be public. If not, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.